How are you doing, Kenny?
Good. Hey, everybody.
Good, good. Alex? Okay.
Hey everyone.
I
Kristen,
believe
are you and Don are ready to go live when we're ready?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
believe we're live.
We are live streaming.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Education Transformation and Finance Committee's virtual meeting today. We will start in the public session and we will then adjourn and go into the executive session. I want to again thank everyone for uh, checking in. We've got some important topics to cover. We're going to get a status update on the federal funding, and then we're going to get an overview on the minimum school funding. We probably will get a deeper dive at a future meeting, and then we will adjourn to executive session to discuss FY27 confidential budget estimates and requests. Again, I want to thank the public for dialing in. There are a number of important issues swirling in the background on finance. I know that we'll get a more updated briefing from the department as the numbers settle and become clear of exactly what was approved in Annapolis. It takes a few days for the bills to be enrolled and then to work through and resolve any questions. That's just normal part of the process. At this time, I would like to turn to Mr. Tulor and Ms. Gunning. They're going to give us an update on the federal funding.
All right. Can you see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Crawford, committee members, and colleagues. We are presenting the impact of the most recent decision by the U.S. Department of Education regarding ESSER funding. As many of you by now know, that on March 28th, Department of Education notified the state education agencies that the late liquidation period that was authorized for the education stabilization funds were ended on March 28th. We received the email at about 5:03 p.m. notifying us that the late liquidation period had ended at 5 p.m. that day. So the letter from USAID made it clear that this change impacted both the ESSER 2 or the SRSA funds as well as the ARP ESSER 3 programs. USAID also notified us that state education agencies are allowed to submit a late liquidation request once again for the consideration of the department on a project-by-project basis by providing a number of pieces of information, two of which specifically stated how a particular project's extension was necessary or is necessary to mitigate the effects of COVID on American students' education, and why the department should exercise its discretion to grant SEA's request. We'll dive a little bit into a background. Maryland received over $2.9 billion in ESSER funds. They came in three buckets: the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Acts, the CARES funding, called ESSER 1, $207 million. The second bucket, SRSA, $868 million, and then the ARP, the third bucket, came in at $1.9 billion. The decision by the USAID impacted the second and third stream of funding that we received. The first one is already spent and closed. In addition, the local education agencies also received about $534 million through the GEAR Fund, Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, and Maryland State and Local Relief Fund dollars, the fiscal relief funds. In total, over $3.5 billion were distributed over 860,000 students at about $600 per pupil funding. This money resulted in about $600 per pupil funding. MSDE, just to state this, we have already conveyed this information at various platforms. We submitted timely late liquidation requests based on the US Ed guidance from 2024, and both SRSA as well as ARP requests were approved. MSDE had until March 31st of 2025 to liquidate ESSER II funding, and March 31st, 2026 to liquidate ESSER III funding. We estimate that the total impact to state of Maryland as a result of this decision is $232.1 million. So at one point, we had estimated an outside possibility of over $400 million in impact, and we have reviewed all the revenues that we have received, expenditures paid, and we revised the number to $232 million, or about 7% of the funding received by Maryland. Of this, about $127.5 million in funds have been spent by LEAs, reimbursed by MSDE, and not yet reimbursed by US Ed. So we have not received the money. That's split into $79.9 million in SRSA, $46.3 million in ARP, and $1.3 million expenses for the Homeless Children and Youth Program. A total of $104.6 million have not yet been spent. No, let me correct this. $104 million has not yet been paid out to the LEAs yet, and in the upcoming slides, we will say how much of this $104.6 million has been spent by LEAs and what is still outstanding in a minute. So the first bucket here, 127.5, is the liability to the state. We have paid the money out and we have not been reimbursed. The next bucket, there is part of the monies that have been spent by LEAs that we have not reimbursed them yet. That's a liability for them. And there is a bucket of money that that's not been spent yet. In addition to the notification we got on March 28th, on April 3rd, US Ed participated in a webinar that was conducted by the Council of Chief State Schools Officers, CCSSO, and gave us additional information. And one thing that was very clear in that conference or in that webinar was that the liquidation approvals are granted at the discretion of the Secretary McMahon, and US Ed was establishing a weekly review process to review and approve the requests that were coming in from all states. We received a follow-up communication that gave us additional clarification on how or what kind of information should be as part of our packet, the information late liquidation request packet. So we received the communication. MSDE took swift actions. Donna Gunning and her team worked extensively in making a lot of these things happen in a short period of time. Our actions included timely notification to the governor's office, the Department of Budget and Management, legislative leaders, notified the local education agencies, the superintendents, as well as the chief financial officers. We created a form and spreadsheet to collect the necessary information from the LEAs to resubmit the late liquidation requests, and we conducted 2 technical assistance sessions to explain what was going on and what we were looking from LEAs. Dr. Wright met with the LEA superintendents on April 7th to go over the ESSER funding and other US Ed communications we received, regarding DEI and other items that are that are in the news. We are also working closely with the Attorney General's office to explore legal options. As of today, we have resubmitted a late liquidation request to USAID totaling $98.7 million. We have submitted the draw request for $79.9 million that was already spent and submitted in SRSA. It's been submitted 3 times. This is the first one was submitted on January 26th, and we submitted our latest request again on April 8th. We have 2 more requests to be submitted. The $46.2 million that I mentioned in one of the earlier slides from ESSER 3 that we have paid LEAs. We will submit an updated draw request to USAID by the 17th of this month. And there is another small piece of about $1.8 million in homeless children and youth that will be submitted by early next week. That's the actions that we have taken so far. In the next couple of slides, we are going to talk about some detailed impact analysis that was compiled based on the data collected by our finance team, and I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Gunning.
Thanks, Krishna. Good afternoon. What you'll see in the next couple of slides is the impact to the state and to the LEAs broken down by bucket of funding, if you will, and status of where we are in the process. So we have 3 status areas. We have expenditures that the LEAs have spent, MSDE has reimbursed the LEAs for, but MSDE has not submitted those for USAID reimbursement. That's bucket 1. Bucket 2 is funds that the LEAs have spent, but not submitted to MSDE for reimbursement. Part of that is because we asked them not to, because if we can't pay them, we can't incur that that expense. And then the third piece is funding that the LEAs are, I'm going to call it pending. It's all obligated. They are either extending a program for Grow Your Own, or they're waiting for all the, a project to be completed before they pay any final invoices. And the reason that those funds are available is because these requests were already approved for late liquidation. So the state and the LEAs were operating as if these were all approved. And so that's why we have these 3 buckets. Any questions on that? Okay, this is just another scenario that shows you, like, using a tutoring company as an example. So we start in the far left column in the scenario where a vendor, a tutoring company, has provided a service. The vendor has incurred a cost. They have been paid by the LEA. The LEA submitted that request to us for reimbursement, and we have requested reimbursement from USAID. Everybody's paid. That's the bucket for that one. The next one is that they have been paid and spent. The vendor has been paid by the LEAs, meaning the LEAs have spent that, but they have not submitted that expense to MSDE to be reimbursed. Therefore, MSDE has also not submitted anything to USAID. The next one is the bucket, it's bucket 2 that I talked about earlier, where the LEA has spent the funds and MSDE has paid them back, but MSDE has not been paid from USAID. And then lastly, it's the bucket where ED has reimbursed MSDE. And the next column talks about where the liability lies. And so there is a the three buckets are MSDE owns the liability, the LEAs own the liability, and in some cases, the vendors own the liability because while the LEAs have recently issued stop work requests, they, there was that time period, February, January, where they're operating with approved late liquidations, and this work is ongoing, and now they can't pay these vendors. So they're really concerned about that part of it. Next slide. Okay.
Thank you. With that, we are ready for any questions and answers.
Okay, very good. If you would take down the PowerPoint, this is very, very helpful. I see we have a question from Dr. Michael.
Thank you. Just trying to square numbers. Can you guide me through? We've got the 232 number on slide 5, and then I'm adding to 145 million on slide 9, or I'm sorry, slide 8. What pieces am I missing?
You're missing the SRSA piece, the 79.9 million. And then that's going to get you to about between 7 and 8 million from 232, and that balance is comprised of the 3.4 left in SRSA, the 1.8 plus another million between HCY and the two EANS programs, and that leaves like little under about a little over $1 million left. And we have attributed that to the estimates that have been, these are all based on estimates from LEAs, and we won't know what it actually is until they actually pay final invoices and submit them to us. But so that extra little over $1 million is some of it is a rounding error and some of it is estimates from the LEAs.
Okay. I'm still just trying to square like what I'm reading on slide 5.
Why don't you bring the slides back up just so that we can all see that again?
What is the relationship between the details on slide 5 and slide 8? Maybe that's a better question.
Oh, yeah, okay. There. Yeah. So the 127.5 that is MSDE's liability, and the 104.6 that is the LEA's liability gets you to the 232.1. The
Let me go to slide 8.
right.
Donna, I'm on slide 8. You are muted, sorry.
Sorry. I think the confusion on this slide might be that there's not a total line for either academic initiatives, capital projects, and then the total, which would sum to the 232. The academic initiatives and capital projects is simply how we organized the late liquidation request that was submitted to USAID today. I think if we added a total to this slide, that might help. And it also doesn't include the SRSA money.
So let me add to what Donna just said. So on slide 5, Dr. Michael, we had the 79.9 million of SRSA dollars that we are yet to be reimbursed for.
For the full group, just tell us, what is SRSA? Is it ESSER 1, 2, or 3?
It is ESSER 2.
Two.
Yeah, the ESSER 2. Okay. So the ESSER 2 funds, the $79.9 million that were spent and paid by MSDE, that has not been reimbursed. And that was noted on slide 5 as part of the overall impact. The ESSER 3 impact, which is primarily it's about $149 million impact, which has 46 point some change, which is spent and paid to the LEAs by MSDE that was not received, and $101 million, $104 million that at the time we began the process, we did not know how much of that money was already spent by LEAs and was not reported to us. So that's the grouping that you have on slide 5. Over here, when we did the ESSER 3 impact, this slide shows the information that we got from the LEAs of that $104 million. And let me go back to slide 5 one quick second. So of the 104 million, we have the 102.8 million in ARP and 1.8 here in HCY. So
Which is homeless children and youth.
Yes, thank you, Donna. Homeless children and youth. So this number here provides us on slide 8, of that money, we have now gotten the breakdown for $98.6 million that was submitted for late liquidation reimbursement today. So the 102 million that you saw over there, it's split in the academic initiatives, and Donna is right. There should have been a total line here. Of that money, we have $41 million that are spent by LEAs that they have not yet sent us the receipts for. 56 million that LEAs have not yet spent, they have obligated it. And then the remaining 46 million, that adds up to the 98 million. That's not state's liability. And the $46 million on top is the state's liability.
Just a suggestion. I know we'll do an update, a brief update at the state board. I would make the numbers on slide 5 my control numbers, and then when I break it out here so that people can easily, we were talking about control number of 231 million.
232, yeah.
Ideally, then, when you look at the breakout, I think the question becomes then, how does this relate? So if we make slide 5 the control 231, then the total here should then add to 231, so people can clearly and easily see. I understand what you did, but for presentation purposes, I would suggest that you make that slide 5 your control and then do your breakout from the numbers on slide 5, which will make it easier for the public.
Yeah, I understand. And we will do that for the final, the board presentation next week.
Okay.
2 weeks, and add those appropriate numbers here.
Absolutely. Dr. Michael, do you have additional questions?
No, my question is will be answered when your suggestion is clarified. So I think we're in good shape.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. We have Mr. Reese and then Mr. Greer.
I'm all set. I'll pass it to Mr. Greer.
Okay, thank you. Team, I have 2 questions. One, on the submissions for requests that we have put in, I see that there's a weekly process from USDE for approvals. Have we received anything back from them on any of our requests so far?
No.
No, okay. The second question is, I seem to remember there being a list of things that would be approved. It was like a short list of like high impact strategies for student learning, like tutoring, in the original letter. And now I'm hearing that it's that it's secretary approved. To what degree are we able to break out which of our requests here, which portion of the funds actually fit into what we would think is an approvable request by this administration?
We are not able to make that estimate at this time. But what we did, when we were looking at the number, we were thinking whether we would be able to break down these expenses with high probability of reimbursement, moderate probability of reimbursement, and low probability of reimbursement. But then, based on the information that we got in the USAID when USAID joined the webinar, is that they said that we could submit both the academic related projects as well as capital related projects, as long as it provides them all the information that they asked for, and specifically to how the project is important to mitigate the learning loss and why should the department use its discretion. So we split, for the purpose of this presentation as well as for the purpose of submission, we split the data into academic initiatives and capital projects. We don't want to assume, just because of this breakdown, we are not assuming or implying that academic initiatives are higher priority and capital initiatives or capital projects would be lower priority. But that is probably the best breakdown we thought we could do at this time.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Have we gotten any feedback, or do you know whether any of the other states have received any feedback on their requests?
Not that we are aware of at this time. We are participating in the CCSSO is setting up really helpful webinars every other week. And they have, and it's been pretty collaborative. States are sharing the information that is available to them at this time. We have not gotten any updates from the most recent webinar we attended last Thursday, but I see Alex's hand up here. If you have anything latest, Alex.
Yeah, no, just agreeing, Krishna. There are CCSSO is bringing together lots of role-alike groups. So obviously, like the state chiefs are getting together, finance leads are getting together, deputies are getting together, and the latest is that no one who has submitted, no state who has submitted, has found out if their request has been approved in part or in full at this time.
Just for one other point here for the public, these subsequent information coming out of the webinars where the Department of Ed has participated, have any of these instructions or further clarifications been in writing, or has it been typically oral?
We have had emails.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Okay. All righty. Ms. Chang.
Yeah, thank you, Clarence. Yeah, I do have one question. I heard that, I just want to verify that you mentioned the homeless funding will be submitted separately for the request. Am I correct?
That is correct. We have two additional. Donna, I'm sorry. Before I misspeak, are we submitting the HCY or EANS?
It's the EANS will be submitted separately, along with, we were planning to submit the EANS because they owe us money for EANS, the EANS and the 46.2 that they owe us by
Okay, so
Thursday.
To follow up on what Donna said, the homeless children and youth, that late liquidation is part of what we submitted today.
Oh, okay. So it's been in, okay.
Yeah, so the EANS, and I misspoke earlier, my apologies. With EANS, it's the Education Assistance for Non-Publics. There was a stream of funding for that through ARP. we are going to request late liquidation for that piece, along with the 46.2 million that we have reimbursed LEAs that we are yet to get back.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is related to the last slide. Could you mind to bring it back? Yeah, with that, the LEA expanded and submitted to MSDE and reimbursed, but yeah, we have not received the reimbursement from USAID. Yeah, so I can see the line number 2 and 3, they have an amount. Yeah, I know their liability either is resides in LEA or MSDE. But how about the last two, 9.4 and 5? And on 9.4, yeah, the service has been rendered, yet there was, paid, but MSDE has not been submitted. Not reimbursed the LEA yet.
Yeah.
But then how come it would become the vendor's liability? Could you explain a little bit?
Yeah. So Donna, I can take this if.
Go right ahead.
So in instances where the work has been completed, some LEAs may have decided to either stop the program or have not paid the vendor for the work that was completed because they had not, and they stopped that process because of the uncertainty. So this would be vendor's liability. They have already done the work, and they may or may not yet have submitted the invoices to LEAs.
But at the end of the day, they have not been paid.
At the end of the day, they have
for
not
work they have completed.
Right. But so in the terms, in a kind of financial world, if the LEA set up some contract with whatever vendor to deliver services, would there be any kind of contract? And if we say, okay, because our kind of resource got or budget got cut, would it be kind of breach of contract? That I would say,
So when we met with the LEAs and particularly with the CFOs, and a number of them raised this concern, our advice was for them to speak to their local board attorneys and get that advice from them.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Because that could be another add to the local LEA liability if they contractors have pursued the work, followed the requirements of their contracts, and not be paid. I could see the contractors coming back to the LEAs. But again, that's okay. So that means then that potentially the total amount in question would be the 231 plus those tasks that have been placed on hold. So it could be, the liability could be actually higher than 230.
No, I don't think so, because the 232 includes both the that 98.6, which is both of the second and third bucket. So the second bucket being the LEAs have paid the vendors, but not submitted to us. And the third bucket being that they have stopped work and not paid the vendors, or they have stopped work and are, shutting down a project because they don't want to be in that situation. So those two figures are included in the 232.
Okay. If you would just again double check that, because if the chart, that last chart doesn't imply that, the last chart, the last chart shows that you get to the 231 looking at, was it line items 3 and 4?
We need to take the 46.2 out of ours. Put it in there.
Just spread that into that fourth row to reflect that. Okay. All righty.
Thank you.
And just to add one little piece of information there, Mr. Crawford, the 127 and 104, that adds up to 232. The 104 includes this number, the 41 million and 56 million. Some of the liabilities that we are talking about for the vendors or LEAs, they are right here between this 41 and 56. That's why it's not going to go over $232 million.
Yeah. Again, as you look at the tables and the numbers, ideally use slide 5 as your control. And that way you can then, as you look at the different slices of it, it makes it easier for the board and the public to be able to just do the crosswalk. Okay. All righty. So we're in this brave new world. We'll see how all of this plays out. Excellent. Any additional questions before we move on? This is a moving target. We will see as the Department of Education makes its decisions. They're probably going to hold till they get a sense of sort of what's out there, the magnitude, before they make their decision. It'd be my guess. They just want to see how big this is, how big the buckets are, and then match that to what their priorities. And I think then we'll start to hear something from them. All righty, very good. Let's now move to the overview and update on the minimum school funding.
Thank you once again, Mr. Crawford. Hopefully you can see my screen with the
Yes, we can.
slide here. Okay. So for the minimum school funding, we're going to start off with a little bit of an introduction and background. You may recall both Ms. Gunning and I came to a previous board meeting to provide an update on the financial reporting system that was set up for the purpose of the minimum school funding tracking. So the requirements are outlined in 534 of 5234 of the education article, where MSDE, in conjunction with AIB, is required to set up a system to track the budget and expenditures data, and to ensure that LEAs, local education agencies, are complying with the minimum school funding requirements that are established under the blueprint. Just a quick review of what we spoke last time. 75% of the per pupil funding goes into the 8 programs that you see here, including foundation, compensatory education, multilingual education, special education, the pre-K transitional supplement, comparable wage index, and CCR. And then the 100% of the per pupil amount go into the private providers, as well as the concentration of poverty. The reporting timeline. So the system that was established, was up and running in July of 2023, as was required, and the 2023-24 year was considered a beta year. That's where we worked with LEAs to ensure that they got the support they needed in creating their interface, the files, receiving the files, testing the data, and then the data reporting began this past July of 2024. We request and we expect the LEAs to submit the data by 15th of each month. The school level budget, so 15th of each month. So the first file of the year is received on August 15th. So on 15th of every month, we expect the data for the prior month. So August 15th of each year is when we get the first file. The school level budget information, as well as the first month's expenditure information, is due in August. These are cumulative submissions. So month over month, when the information comes in, there's the ability for LEAs to make any corrections to the data, and then the expenditure data adds up with each of the file. MSDE is required to submit a report to AIB each year on the 1st of January. And the first of those series of reports were prepared and submitted by Donna to the AIB this year in the first week of January. And the data that was the report that we created for LEAs included the data through November of this fiscal year. The November data was due on December 15th. And we had some LEAs that requested like about a week's extension. The last of the files were received on the 19th of December, and then Donna worked on it afterwards. LEAs are required to submit the final audited data for the fiscal year that ended by October 15th of the October 15th, which is the next fiscal year. So our FY 2025 that ends on June 30 this year, the final submitted data for FY 25 will be due on or before October 15th of this year. At that point, LEAs would have started submitting the data, the monthly data for the next fiscal year FY 26 as well. So there will be a small period of time where we will be collecting the data for the new year while waiting for the final data for the year that just ended. Spoke a little bit about this just now in terms of timeline. Our system development next steps would be to create a public-facing site with the navigation support and updated guidance once we have received the full year's data for FY 2025, which would be October of this year. Internally, we have a work group that meets each week that has stakeholders from AIB, local education agencies, as well as our contracting partners, the implementers from PowerSchool. And any any changes to the necessary changes to the Baby Blue Book, which contains the reporting guidelines. Those are our next steps. We have, even though this is the first year in which, or we are calling this the baseline year, when we are collecting the baseline data, and we had 1 year of beta testing with LEAs. We had some LEAs that still were not in a position to start reporting data from July of 2024. The reasons were primarily, many of the reasons were primarily related to systems. There were a couple of LEAs that were implementing the new financial systems altogether. There were some LEAs that were still in the coding process of changing their chart of accounts to be able to report the data at the level that we needed. So, and then there were a couple of LEAs that they had staff transition, and so that took them time to finalize the data. At the time we prepared this slide, this was our update that 19 LEAs had met the deadline for February expenditures, and 3 had data reporting issues. But as of this past Monday, we can report that all but 1 LEA have been able to submit the files. And the last LEA that's remaining is confident that they are making good progress and are able to submit the data this month, which they can submit anytime starting today. So we are monitoring that closely. So that is an update that we have from the time we submitted, we prepared this presentation. We talked a little bit about next steps in the previous slide. We are also looking at some additional steps to support LEAs in terms of training, how to help them during the submission process, and helping them with understanding the errors that may come up that they may encounter while submitting the data. And these are some of the next steps that we are taking. Next, we are going into the analysis of the budget and expenditure reports, and I'm going to turn this part over to Ms. Gunning.
Thank you, Krishna. So there are a couple of caveats that we want to explain about this data. So the fiscal year starts July 1st every year. For many school systems, their time of actual spending is really more in full swing by September. So this data that was submitted to AIB was from July through November. So we took December 15th data, which would have included all expenditures and budget through November. But the reality of it is it's not 5 months of expenditures, it's more like 3 because of how the spending works in a local school system. So we compiled that data, ran a couple of scenarios looking at by school system, by program by school system, and just to get a sense of what this data looks like. Then AIB has one of their strategic partners that did a deep dive into the data and did the analysis for AIB, and I'll talk to you about that in just a second. The link is in this PowerPoint for the AIB data, if you will. One of the things that AIB has been encouraging LEAs to do is to continue to work with their strategic partners to get that support they need in developing methodology and analyzing data to help them budget at the school level. This is all new, so this is another context that's important. The lift that was involved in reporting expenditures and budget data at the school level for Maryland's LEAs was huge. Many of them they may have had a per student allocation methodology for some of their budgeting, but certainly not at the school level. So this has been a huge lift, and the majority of them have done a really good job of, they had to recode their finance systems, and a lot of their actual systems had to be revised in order to accept this coding. And so what we get out of that is budget and expenditure level data at the school level by program. So the programs that were on the slide earlier, we get all of that data by program, by school. So what the strategic partner for AIB did with this data is they said, okay, in order to get a sense of who is likely to meet the minimum student school funding requirement and who has a longer way to go, they did the analysis looking at as if their amount expected was 3 months of expenditures, not 5. And so when they looked at the data that way, they could identify in what they have reported as a more I don't want to say accurate, but more realistic picture of what's happening at the LEA level. So they, their data that is in that report reflects all of that. So let me just kind of regroup here. Yep. Okay. So the other thing that's helpful in this report is that the data that comes out is the system automatically calculates based on the demographics of the enrollment in that school, and the annual per pupil amounts are. With all that data will then calculate at the school level what they would expect to see budgeted. So what's 75% of this total at that school? And so we looked at that calculated amount, if you will, and compared it to how much was budgeted. Clearly, if it was under what the calculated amount was, that was something that needed to be looked at a little, the LEAs need to look at that a little bit more. For a lot of them, it's over. They have budgeted over the minimum school funding requirement. And when we look at that a little bit more detail, we find that a lot that is typically in the case of LEAs that have local governments that fund over maintenance of effort. So this is the data that the AIB's consultant came up with, and they did realize. Oh, can you go back one? Thanks. So the one other thing that is important is to note is for Workforce Development Board, which is funding that LEAs, it's a set amount of funding from foundation that LEAs have to provide to local workforce development boards to support career planning for all students in grades 6 through 12. Because of the way those programs are operating, what many LEAs are going to do is at the end of the year, they'll journal those expenditures into Workforce Development Board rather than have them allocated out throughout the year. And MSE didn't have an issue with that, and AIB did not either. And the other piece that's important to note is for special education only, LEAs can decide whether they're going to report that data in the aggregate at the LEA level or by school. They can do both, but they're going to be evaluated on which box they check. So that is also something that comes out of the system and shows when you're looking at the data, you can see that as well. Okay, this is what AIB realized, and we can go to the next slide. Yep, this is the 3 months. Yep, I think we talked about this. Comparing budget versus expenditures. These are some lessons learned from the analysis that the AIB consultant did. These are some of the things I talked about earlier and the magnitude of change required of districts. That reminder that 25 is the baseline years, and one of the things that AIB's consultant, if you look at their report, you'll see it pretty consistently in there, and it makes sense that 25 is what it is, right? What these LEAs really need to focus on is what their budget's going to look like for 26. So that their recommendation was for all of the strategic partners to, when we're working with the LEAs, focus on developing their 26 budget, and then also focus on those programs with the least number of schools that are meeting the minimum school funding requirement. Because the joint policy between AIB and the state school board, it's a 3-year system. 25 is the baseline year. In 26, they have to reduce the number of students attending a school that does not meet maintenance of school funding by 50%. And then in 27, they all have to meet the requirement. So there is an option for a waiver. AIB has just developed and released their waiver language to LEAs, and if necessary, LEAs are applying for waivers. Next slide. Okay. Questions?
Thank you, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Crawford, I think you're muted. Your mic is muted.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. Would like to, at a future meeting, dive a little bit more deeply into the data and be able to see exactly what's going on at the school level and get a sense of where the individual LEAs are. We can do that at a future meeting. The floor is open for any questions or comments. on this. This is new. So probably 25. 25 is the baseline. 26 will be really interesting to see
Mhm.
how that plays out.
Yes.
Any questions? Ms. Chang?
Yes, thank you. I do have a question on slide number 7 about the 19 schools submitted, and there are 3 have data issues. Are those 3 part of the group of 19 submitted?
No, they would be out. The 19 are good, and the 3 are ones that had data issues, so that we would not consider their data submission complete.
Got it. So that means we are 2 districts short.
No, I don't believe so, because that was for February data that was submitted in March. And when we receive files like that, that are, the LEAs are struggling with why they're not submitted properly, the system does have some quality control statistics that the LEAs can look at. I think that the LEAs have varying degrees of understanding of how those quality control pieces of information can help them. And that's one of the things that we are working on moving forward, is to do some deep dive technical assistance on how to use those quality control slides to help the LEAs in self correcting the issues that they find when the files don't show up the way they expected them to. So I think that that was February data, and then we worked with those 3 LEAs, and I think all but 1 was able to resolve their issues.
I see. So the question I have here is really kind of try to help the LEAs if they have run into some challenges, either with their system converted to a different vendors, things like that. The recoding is really time consuming and very tedious work. And that is why I'm asking 19 plus 3, so that's 22. And we have 24 districts, and that's why I throw out the question, say, any LEAs needed extra help or resources to resolve those issues?
Yes. So our implementation partners with PowerSchool and the technical teams, they are available to work with these LEAs. We have a weekly check-in of the team from MSDE, AIB, the implementation partner, and one of our local CFOs from St. Mary's County. She's been an outstanding support for us in this process. So we meet and we go over where LEAs are, or what issues they're facing, and what support they're receiving, as well as a staff member in Ms. Gunning's team, Mr. Jesse Rao, is a dedicated project support from MSDE. He also works with PowerSchool closely and helps answer LEA questions. One of the things that we are planning to do at this time as part of our weekly check-in, as we are closing this year, we are getting close to closing this year, we are putting together a lessons learned and end of year kind of a plan. Some of the lessons learned were already in the slide presentation that we did. So that's going to help us guide what additional supports LEAs will need over this summer to ensure that when the FY26 data starts coming in, we don't run into similar issues.
That's great to hear. And the other thing is, I heard Ms. Gunning mention about the system can, before each LEA submit their data to MSD system, is there any some sort of a self-care message you say before you submit if there are data errors or something that the
Yeah.
LEAs could get alert even
Yep.
before they hit submit.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work before they hit submit. It works
Mhm.
after they're submitted, and then it
Oh.
analyzes the files because every month each LEA has to submit 4 files, and so um, it could be just issues with one file that makes
Mhm.
the whole thing off. So once they submit their files, then the quality control process will tell them, this file had critical errors, but
Mhm.
these other 3 are fine. And it will go through those critical errors and help them identify. It gives them the row number and things like that. So it's pretty detailed. Um, and it's not a system that says it only shows you the first error and then you fix that and then you find out there's all these others. It shows all of them
That's great.
and by file. So what I think the support that the LEAs need is how to interpret
Mhm.
those files and how to also cross-reference the files, and it's very
Mhm.
likely the same issue across all 4.
Okay,
So that's
wonderful.
what we're working with them on now.
Thank you for the hard work.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to I'm going to read a statement that will allow us to go into, oh, I lost. I got booted out of the system. I was going to read a statement from council, just an update. I believe that concerning the first item, the federal funding, we have joined other states to file an injunction, I believe, with the Department of Education over their decisions related to the federal funding. So that action is ongoing on a separate track. Just wanted to make sure the public was aware of that, and we will keep you advised of that progress. Okay. What we will do now is I'm going to read a statement that will allow us to go into executive session. And again, what we're going to be talking about is really the first steps in creating the FY 2027 budget. We're implementing a new process this year that allows the board and the department to begin thinking about FY 27 in a more orderly fashion earlier on in the process. So where we stand right now is we're starting to look at initial budget estimates and priorities that will feed into the governor's budget. And the governor's budget, as you know, is an embargoed document that will not be made public until, I believe, January of 2026. So I wanted to explain that to the public. We're going to go into executive session and we will adjourn from executive session at or about 5:30 p.m. this evening. Pursuant to Section 3-305B 13 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, the Education, Transformation, and Finance Committee will adjourn to executive session to discuss the following: the FY 2027 confidential budget estimates and requests. The floor is now open for any discussion of the motion. The floor is now open to receive a motion that will allow us to go into executive session. The motion needs to come from a member of our committee.
I make a motion to move to executive section.
Very good. Ms. Chang makes the motion. Do we have a second? Second, Mr. Chesterfield. The motion is now open for discussion. Seeing no discussion, the members of our committee Those in favor of adjourning to executive session, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Okay, so we will now go into executive session. And again, thank you, members of the public, for participating. And we will see you, I guess, tomorrow with the ed policy and then next week with our board. So thank you much for everything.